So I tell you what, we're doing this year. Craig Siegel lost his dad. We did our Kaddish together. When I finished the last part of my
The mom.
he was
The mother.
the Kaddish, yes, and he lost his mom. So we're doing this year for Nechama Ella Bat Laser. She passed away a few days ago, and he flew back to South Africa for the funeral. So he lost both parents in a very short period of time, unfortunately.
Yep.
So I'm really sorry about that. Similar to Stephen. So I'm going to do the opening brachas for learning the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'sukot divrei Torah. Barev na Adonai Eloheinu divrei Toracha b'finim v'yimcha beit Yisrael v'niyeh nachnu v'tzetzenu v'tzetzemcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lumdei v'retecha lishma Baruch atah Adonai melamed Torah l'Am Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notenu Torah. I hope Hashem is pleased with the shir. Guys, I'm sorry. Honestly, I love to chat. It's just it's 40 minutes deadline, and Mark was to start the markets at 9. He's got a real job running things, and like my time is like. So okay, so let's get started. Where's Stephen? He's gone AWOL. Gavin's rebooting. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly start and discuss a quick concept in the 10 days. It was a fast of Gedalia yesterday. Now, these 10 days are known as Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days of repentance. So basically, it's from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, and it's known as the 10 days of return. So how does it come about? When the prophet Isaiah tells the Jewish people to repent for their sins, he said, seek God where he may be found, call him when he is close. When is that? And the sages discuss that this verse refers to the 10 days when God is especially close to us. And when is this discussion taking place? In Isaiah chapter 55, verse 6. And from that, we start to learn a little bit of the halachas. So why is it discussed that God's close to us? Is because it describes this period as a period of time when the gates of heaven are open and will listen to your prayers. So the Rambam, Maimonides, explains that even though repentance and crying out to God are always timely, always, during the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, it's exceedingly appropriate and auspicious because that's the period of time that Hashem is looking to see if we're going to change our behavior. And it's a time when your prayers are immediately accepted upon high. So for these reasons, continues the Rambam, it's customary for all of Klal Yisrael to give profusely to charity, perform many good deeds, and be occupied with the observance of God's commandments from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur to a great extent in the remainder of the year. So I did the opening bracha while you were away for the Siddur, so you can just do it quietly to yourself if you need to. Are you with me?
Yeah. Now I'm going to dive in after this. I'll do it properly then.
All right. So I had you in mind. So that's all right.
Thanks,
so guys, we're going to get started on the actual Gemara quickly. I'm gonna mute you all automatically unless there's a question. Does that make sense? And you just unmute yourself.
Sure.
Okay. All right, guys. So this is where we left off yesterday. We left off on 17a3, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let you know that there is a difference between Troros and Regul in more than one regard. So this is what we're going to examine from the opening part of the Mishnah, is that one of the differences, we're talking about a case of Regul is called mammon, which is compensation in nature. It's actually not a penalty, if you remember from the last stuff. It's not a kanas. So it's a rule from Moshe from Har Sinai. And on that particular case, the Mishnah talks about half damages for Keren and half damages for Regul. So obviously there we mean Troros. And on that particular basis, there are two major differences. The first difference is that Keren is liable for half damages in the public domain, whereas Troros is a case of regal where it's not liable for damages in the public domain. The second difference that you have is that there's a leniency with Keren, half damages for a tum animal, in that you pay for the gufa of the actual animal itself. And what we learned is that it's not the same with Troros. If you remember, we did a review recently of the third daf. And on that review of the third daf, we had, at the end of the third daf, there was Rav Papa. Do you remember Rav Papa had all these questions and said the Tordos, Stephen, which are the subcategories, are not like the main category. And we went through all of them, Stephen. We went through, initially we went through Keren, we went through Shane, we went through Regal, we went through Bor, which was Pit, we went through Mave, which is man, we went through Have, and we looked at it and we saw that the subcategories were the same in law as the primary category because the operating principles were exactly the same. And therefore liability was the same, exactly the same. And I've got a chart which Gavin did, which is absolutely stunning, which I'm going to share the Tordo and the Av. But there was a conversation where Rav Papa was trying to see this difference. And the difference that he brought forward was a case of Troros, which is where an animal kicks out pebbles or does anything by its bodily force that causes damage. In other words, it's not from his body touching directly. It's actually from an indirect sort of damage. That's the principle of Troros. One of the issues is that Rav Papa said that the rule from Moshe Sinai makes it regal because it's exempt in the public domain. And the second reason is that you pay from choice property, like the case of regal. It's not from the gufa of the animal, meaning it doesn't have the leniency, like I explained to you yesterday, that if it's a puny animal attacking, that you have that second leniency apart from half payment. But it's not such a clear case because we learned when we did the third daf that Rava never resolved whether that issue was true or not. Rava's main question was, he said that it's possible that with Troros damage, it's limited by the gufa of the animal, the body of the animal. So it said, well, if he's determining that sounds like Keren for Troros. What do we mean that he says it's a case of regal? And the reason why Rava said it's a case of regal, the Torda of regal, is that it's exempt in the public domain, the Rishus HaRabim. So Rava comes to learn out that it's exempt in the Rishus HaRabim, and we come to learn out that Rav Papa said it's not only exempt in the Rishus HaRabim, but it's also from choice property, like a standard case of regal. You remember, this is not a kicking in terms of a temper to injure or kill. This is just the animal's motion that kicks up pebbles or anything. But if a stone flies in the public domain and injures somebody, you're not liable. It's only if it hits somebody in their private, what do you call it, their shuk store, where they own it privately, or a private vessel in a private domain. Are we all clear on this point, the difference between Rava and Rav Papa with regards to Troros? You unmuted. Guys, you clear?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, good.
Please just go for 1 minute. Just go over it. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
No, it's
something.
Not a problem.
Just that for once. Just 30-second summary there, please.
Okay, Tzorot and Tzorot is a subcategory of regal. The Mishnah talks about half damages, and it talks about two aspects. It talks about Keren with a tum animal, and a Keren has two leniencies. Firstly, for the first 3 times that it damages, it's tame, considered not forewarned because it's not the habitual nature of an animal, and therefore you pay half damages and the second leniency is from the gufa of the animal. So if the attacking animal is a puny animal, you not only pay half damages, but it's limited to the payment of the value of the attacking animal. But with Troros, which is the animal's motion at which it kicks and injures indirectly, so it kicks pebbles from under its feet, we say that's a case of regal because it's not an animal kicking in temper, it's the normal way that an animal gallops. So anything caused by its secondary force, meaning indirect, it's a case of Troros. And Rav Papa learns that it is half damages from choice property. Rava is not so sure. He says, yes, it is half damages, but he's not sure if the second leniency doesn't apply from the gufa of the animal. Meaning if it's a puny animal, you don't pay from choice property. So we say, according to Rava, if that's the case, it sounds like Keren. He said, no, it's not Keren, because it's exempt in the public domain. Reason being is it's the motion at which the animal moves. It's not, it doesn't resemble Keren at all. So it's only on those 2 points that they differ. Right. Okay. So guys, what I'm going to do is we're going to carry on, and I'm going to share my screen with you.
Karen, is that the foot, Damon?
No. Karen, I'm going to share Gavin's chart now to answer your very question. Stephen, what I would love from you at a certain point is I want you to, after hours, maybe give me 20 minutes or half an hour to put you up to speed with everything, because you deserve to know what's going on. And I want to be able to give that to you. So the only way I can give that to you is if you can give me some time after hours in order to make sure that this is achieved. You don't have to, but it's going to make your life easier since you've made such a good commitment
in the evenings.
In this regard. Not long. All I need from you is like when you've got 20 minutes here or there, just to put you up to speed. So guys, I'm going to share the chart, and I'm going to show you what's going on here. Gavin did a beautiful chart. I love it. All right, so this is the first chart. Stephen, I'm going to show you exactly what it's about. Now, if you have a look, there are 4 primary damages in the Mishnah. Can you all see this chart?
Yes.
Okay, ox is shor, pit is bor, mave is either an argument between Rav and Shmuel, but mave, according to Rav, is mankind, and Shmuel, it's the shane, it's the tooth, where we can go back to there. And fire is haveh. So, Stephen, I need to inform you what these things are, but just for the sake of this discussion, there are 4 primary damages in the Mishnah. You can think of it as ox, pit, maveh, which is man according to Rav, and fire. Now, under the ox, you've got 3 primary damages, Stephen. You've got goring, which is keren, and you've got tooth, which is shane, and you've got foot, which is regel. So goring, which is keren, has 4 subcategories, 4 todos, and that is, there's 2 different things. There's 2 different pushings. So keren is when the animal, takes a charging at you and smacks you with the horn. You have nagicha and nagifa. So nagifa is pushing with the body. Nagicha is pushing with a horn. Biting is nashicha, squatting is ravitza, and kicking is vaita. Okay, so that's whenever an animal intends to do damage. So keren has 2 features to it, Stephen. The first one is intent to damage or kill, and the second one is anything that's considered unusual damage is put down to keren, because the 2 unique features of it is intent to damage and unusual damage. Now, tooth, which is shane, which is the eating, that is your av, that's your primary category. When we talk about primary categories, we mention the biblical sourcing for it. The subcategories mimic it in terms of concept, but it's not the same activity exactly, but it's the same reason that the animal does it. So when an animal smacks with its horn or bites, its intention is to do damage, for example. With the tooth, the eating, the shame, the physical gratification. The eating is the actual av mentioned in the Torah, and other sorts of physical gratification where the animal rubs up against the wall to satisfy an itch, or is soiling fruits. How does it soil fruits? One of 2 ways. It either rolls in a vegetable patch and relaxes and is sleepy, or it urinates to relieve itself. So those are the subcategories of tooth. A foot regel. So the standard case of regel is where the foot, in the normal course of the animal's walking, does damage. The subcategories, the todos of regel, is when it does damage with its body or an extension of its body. What do we mean by an extension of its body? We mean that when an animal has got a bit in its mouth, a backpack that it's loaded with, or even, for example, a wagon that's attached to the animal. It's an extension of the animal, a barrel around its neck. So when that animal moves, that extension that's tied to it is also going to cause damage. So that's the normal way that an animal moves, and it's most common because every second that an animal moves, it damages. So tordos are damages caused by animal movement, and the av is literally the foot in the normal course of its walking. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom in the chart a second, guys, to make you a little bit aware. All right, now you should be able to see it a little bit clearer. You can see it now clearer, guys, hey?
Sure, don't worry.
All right, good. So, Stephen, this is for you. But for the sake of the guys, what I do want to do is I actually want to use that opportunity to actually fill you in, because it's the guys are ahead, and as respect for them, I don't want to have to do revision every year. So if you can kindly give me some time after hours, I will make myself available to catch you up to speed. You're a bright guy. It won't take me long, Stephen. I'll put you up to speed. All right. So how does this occur with this argument of Keren and Soros? Let's look at it. It says, but if the animal was kicking, or if pebbles were shooting out from under her feet, and she broke utensils in this way, then the animal's owner pays only half damages. So either it's Keren damage where the animal kicked the vessel in temper, or broke utensils by a pebble shooting out from under its feet. Those are half damage payments. The reasons are two different reasons, but in principle, it's half payment damage. The implication is if it's Keren damage, you're liable to half that damage in the public domain. If it's Soros, not. It's only if it causes that damage in the private domain. Because with Regal and Shane, Stephen, you are not obligated to pay in the public domain. That's where all animals are allowed to be. It's only for Keren damage where the animal goes crazy and it intends to damage or kill that you're liable to pay in the public domain, because your animal has permission to be there, but it doesn't have permission to damage. Okay. We're doing revision that I can't do revision.
Maybe it's just a technical issue.
No,
Hopefully it's
not
just
at
a
all.
technical issue.
No, not at all. Just, you may reconnect. Carry on, Budgie.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So let's go on with our issue, which is of primary importance. So now what we're doing is we're discussing a case there are two different cases of Soros. So the first thing is that an animal breaks it on its normal walking. The second thing is as it smashes down when it walks, a shard of ceramic comes and claps a second vessel. So if that happens, the first primary vessel that gets destroyed is full damages. And the reason it's full damages is that's a standard case of Regal. And the second damage is also a case of Regal, but it's half damages because it's Soros from the impact of the first vessel sending a secondary force to the second vessel. That's all we have to know in the Mishnah. Right. Now we're going on to a second part of the Mishnah, which is a discourse and a discussion between Ravina and Rava. Okay. So obviously the Gemara is now at the point where we've discussed the Mishnah and it wants to say that it appears to be a redundancy. What's the redundancy? The redundancy is very straightforward. It's the Mishnah says the foot is muad to break things in the course of its walking. And then it says an animal is muad to walk normally and break things. So what it's actually asking is, isn't the first statement a repetition of the second? That's what the Gemara is trying to ask. And this is a discussion between Rava and Ravina. So Rava answers that the two statements are actually not identical. I'm going to read it from the Gemara now, because the first statement refers specifically to damage that the animal causes with the foot, because it said the foot is muad to break things in the course of its working. So the first thing of it is it's talking about the primary category, which is Av. And the Av is always the prototype for the category of Regal on the animal's foot. The Mishnah's second statement, an animal is muad, refers actually to the tordos, the body of the animal. So it's the same principles at work, right? Because the animal is not trying to seek gratification of its wants or needs. It's not doing it with malicious intent. So then it goes in the case of Regal, is it damages something by way of its normal activities. In other words, if something's in its way, it'll knock it, either with the body, the hair, or attached backpacks. Any of those things are part of the animal. So damage caused by other parts of the animal are not discussed in the biblical verse, but they have the same operative principles. So those are the totals. And I'm saying this, guys, you know it. It's just for Stephen's sake when he comes back to listen to the audio. Fine. Now, the argument between Ravina and Rav is as follows. It says, which damage is called foot? Ravina said to Rava, which damage is called foot and which damage is called an animal? Are not the first two statements of the Mishnah essentially identical? So the Gemara answers, Rava replied to him, with the first statement, the Tane stated the primary cases of regel, and now with the second statement, he states the subcategories. So Ravina challenges his answer. He said, listen, but accordingly, the end of the Mishnah, which states the tooth of an animal is muad and then an animal is muad, would have to be explained the same way. But what primary cases and subcategories are there in that part of the Mishnah? So first thing is that you guys have got to know is that what happens a lot with the Gemara is it discusses a case of inconsistencies. It doesn't want any sort of inconsistency. So what it's saying is, right, I understand here you're saying the first part of the statement is an av and the second part is the torda. But when we do the Mishnah on 9b, something doesn't make sense. And why have you got that inconsistency and repetitive nature there? So basically, it has to be answered in that second daf as well. And I'm going to share the screen with you to show you what daf I'm talking about on 19b. It's part of discussion in this Gemara. I'm not going on a tangent, guys. This is really part of the Gemara. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Now this guys is on 19b. Oh, Stephen's got load shedding. All right.
There you go.
All right. Well, it's not me, guys, this particular time.
It never was, but.
Okay. Okay. Let me just go to 9b. Yeah. All right. Guys, can you see the Mishnah on my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 19b it says, within the context of the primary category of eating, for what damage caused with the tooth is an animal forewarned? It's deemed forewarned with regard to eating food items that are fit for its consumption. The domesticated animal is deemed forewarned with regards to eating fruits and vegetables. So what it's saying here is very clear. Ravina isn't happy with this. He's saying, right, I hear your answer. This is what he says to Rabba. But if you're looking at 19b, this repetitive nature seems to repeat itself in that Mishnah also. Why? Because we see that it's deemed forewarned with regard to eating. It's deemed forewarned with regard to eating fruits and vegetables. So we're saying, basically, Ravina wants an answer from Rava with regards to that. And it's saying, listen, I want you to sort this particular out because it's not a case of primary categories and subcategories in 19b. So what are we talking about? Let's look again at the chart. Okay, now let's look at the chart. What is the av? There's only one av here of Shane, and that is tooth eating. He's saying it's not a case where you've got a subcategory. And what do we mean a subcategory? Where regel, the primary category is the foot, and the regel is the subcategory of damage done by its body. In tooth, in Mishnah 19b, it only talks about the primary category, the av, the tooth. It doesn't talk about a subcategory of rubbing against something and damaging it, or soiling fruits by whatever, urinating or rolling in it, etc. So it's saying it doesn't make particular sense in this particular Mishnah for the repetition, because you can't say in 19b it's talking about the av and the tordos. Can you see that, guys?
Yes.
So that's the issue that's at hand. Now, Rava replies, and this is why I like the Gemara, is that we sometimes think that these guys are very serious. Now, they are serious, but they also had a bit of a sense of humor. So it says in the Gemara a very funny statement. Rava says to him, because the subject matter is serious, but in a joking way, listen, I answered the last one. Ravina, you answer this one. I want to see what you come up with. And we don't often see that these guys seem to, have a sense of humor. but it's actually like they do. And what really is the explanation of the redundancy? So Rav Ashi said in explanation of this 19b issue is that the Tana stated in the first tooth that is the damage of a wild beast. And then the second statement is the tooth of a domestic animal. And it was necessary for the Tana to mention the case of the wild beast explicitly. Otherwise, you would have thought that since it's written and he sends forth his animal for regular damage done by one's domestic animal, he's liable. But for a wild beast, he's not liable, since wild beasts are not mentioned in this verse. So we're going to explain, I'm going to explain to you guys what we actually mean by this exactly. Okay. So it's not the identical redundancy that we had, because look here. If you look, can you see my mouse says within the context of the primary category of eating? Primary category. So eating Shane is the primary, eating is the primary category of Shane, and it's not talking about subcategories. So remember in the Mishnah that we dealt with in 17a3, it's talking about regal foot, the Av, and then the tortoise. Here it's not. But if we have a look, there is a clue to this answer of Rav Ashi. Why? Let's look. It's not repetitive. Here. It's deemed forewarned with regard to eating food items fit for its consumption. The domesticated animal is deemed forewarned with regards to eating fruit and vegetables. Now, do you remember a thing in Bava Kamma where it talks about the previous Mishnah? Let me just see if I can find it. It's got to be here. Do you remember when it talks about that these are the wild animals? There's the lion, the bardalas, the cheetah, the snake. Do you remember our previous discussion as far as that's concerned?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that talked about in the previous daf is that I don't know where it's popped off to, but in the previous daf it talks about the fact that my particular animal that I domesticated is a wild animal. And in that case, its food is not going to be fruit and vegetables at all. Why is the case not going to be fruit and vegetables? Well, very, very simply, because a lion eats meat. Okay, let me just, my screen's giving me a bit of hassles. Here it's back. So in other words, the first statement is dealing with, in the Mishnah, with regard to eating foods that are fit for its consumption. So wild animals are what? Carnivores. Domesticated animals, what? Eating fruit and vegetables. So every time we see the word eating fruit and vegetables, we're talking about a behemoth, a domesticated animal. And every time we're talking about a wild animal, it's eating food appropriate for it, which is meat and carnivore in nature. So therefore, we needed this Mishnah not to talk about the Av and the Tordot, but that if you raise a wild animal, that you're responsible for the damage it does with regards to physical gratification. Remember, we said if a lion pounces on it and tears its flesh, etc., while the animal is still alive. So that's what we were talking about. Now, there is a particular question that comes up, and that question that comes up is as follows, is that if we look at, Kevin, you know Hebrew. Do you know what chaya means?
Chaya is wild animal.
Yes. So chaya is a wild animal, but there are two different distinct types of wild animal. The one, a behemoth can refer to a wild animal, but actually a wild animal that is purely a herbivore in nature. What do we mean? I'll show you now.
Rhino.
Yeah, rhino, elephant, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hippo, yeah.
Giraffe.
So I'm going to, sorry, it was giving me a screen share problem there. I'm going to just share my screen again. This thing is driving me mad. All right, so if we have a look here, yeah. Firstly, the case of it is in Deuteronomy. I think it's 14:4. These are the animals that you may eat: the ox, the sheep, and the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roebuck, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. Now notice that the word here, bahema, is talking about wild animals in this context and domesticated animals of the ox, the sheep, and the goat. So it says that sometimes, even in the Chumash, the term bahema can mean wild as well as domesticated. But however, the principle within that is that they're still herbivores. When we talk about a chaya, we're talking about a wild animal that's carnivorous in nature. So we say that we couldn't deduce that from the actual Mishnah itself. There's no ways that we could have deduced that at all. And especially in the verse where it said, let a man let his livestock loose to graze in another's land, and so allows a field or vineyard to be grazed bare, he must make restitution for the impairment of that field or vineyard. There we talk about shame damage, okay? And in that particular case, we're talking about a domestic animal. So we wouldn't have known this without that particular biblical inference. Fine. So I just wanted to discuss. Sorry, Michael, what did you say?
That's why I would say the fruit and vegetables.
Correct. So the fruit and vegetables are for the domesticated animals mentioned second. The wild animals are mentioned first. So the Gemara then asks a very good question on this. And it says the following. It says, why was it done in this particular order? Because what it should have mentioned first is the biblical ordinance. What does it say? And his animal shall send forth. We always generally mention the biblical verse first. And why did we? Because, and he sends forth implies domesticated animal first and then wild animal. So why here did the Tana mention the wild animal first and then the domesticated when it talks about the Mishnah and the Brisa? And it says the reason he did it first is because he wanted to teach the more novel case first, because he was more affectionately fond of it. For something that you extrapolate, it said the Tana was more fond of. Meaning, even though it could have mentioned the biblical verse first, which is a domesticated animal, it mentioned in the Mishnah the wild animal first because it's a more novel case. So that's the why it was the order. So that's why the Gemara questions the order of that. Now, the second thing of it is the Gemara questions the order and says, listen, well, why did we do the same thing with regards to regal? Okay? And we're on 17b2. And it says as follows, the Gemara asks, if so, then in the first part of the Mishnah, why didn't the Tana mention that the one that was derived through exposition? Meaning, what was derived through exposition where we're talking about regal? It's actually the tordos. It's the tordos. That was the more novel case, not the fact that the animal stood on something with its foot. So it said, well, why didn't it teach it in that, in that order too? And it's saying you can't compare the two cases. Why? Because in the case of the regal, you never mention the tordos before the av. It doesn't make any sense. You always mention the av and then the tordos. But in this case of the tooth, they're both primary categories, Kev.
Yeah.
They're both primary categories of tooth. Meaning whether you talk about a domestic animal that eats all wild animals, you can mention it in any order. Why? Because you're just talking about shame, which is the av. You're not talking about subcategories and primary categories. And therefore, since you're not talking about things of lesser importance, you can bring the other one up first. And then secondly, we bring up the av first in the case of the primary category because the av is the Torah explicit nature. So here we learn a rule that when we have, Kevin, for example, the tordos, that's not a biblical inference. So you can't mention that first. Why? Because the biblical verse needs to be mentioned first. So why did we do that in the case of Shane? We didn't. Because the case of Shane is the biblical verse. Remember, whether it's a wild animal that uses its tooth or domesticated animal, it's both the av, it's the biblical verse. So the Tana there has the right to teach what is more dear to him first. In other words, the novel case, rather than the obvious case. But you don't with regards to regal and its tordos, because a tordos is, a mental abstraction on the same operating principles of how the animal did damage or what did damage. Okay, Kevin's
So
got.
Dan,
Yeah?
so just tell me, just in the Torah,
Yes.
just you understand regarding the reference to the wild animal and then the fruit and vegetable story. How is it how's it said in the Torah? I mean, so just in that regard, is it said like that?
Okay, so you're asking what's the source
in
of
the
a wild
Chumash,
animal in the Torah?
Yeah, in the Chumash. Is it said like?
Okay, so what it says is the
like
word, it's true. In Deuteronomy, it says chapter 14, verse 4, when it talks about a behemoth, it comes to include wild animals, like the deer and the gazelle, etc., as opposed to the ox and the sheep. But what we're talking about here is it doesn't explicitly mention carnivorous wild animals. That's why the Mishnah had to bring it forward with the word chaya, which implies the carnivorous wild animal. And it's valid, but most people don't have a hobby of raising wild animals. You know, you might do it for protection or some other things, but the majority of cases were domesticated. In terms of a source for wild animal in the Chumash, I can find out for you.
I just want to know. It's fine. It's fine.
So what it's basically saying is that the Tana generally would open with the primary case that I've mentioned in the Torah, and then the Tordos of Regel. So it's, but in truth, they're both primary cases. That's why the order is as it is. But there is an alternative answer. The Tana used the term foot because what happened was in 15b, it started off by saying it was ending a discussion on a regal damage with the foot, and now it's when it's reopening the argument, it starts off with that same term, the foot, the av. So according to even the second explanation, it's mentioning this Mishnah in context where the last Mishnah went off. So that's why it discusses this particular order. And we have got 4 minutes left. Guys, I think we can leave it alone. We've got more stuff to discuss next time.